Legal Rebels. This is Tom Martin. I'm the founder of LawDroid, and this is my podcast, LawDroid Manifesto, where I interview legal innovators about how they do what they do. In this episode, I interview Brian Liu, founder of LegalZoom, whose pioneering work democratizing legal services has transformed the legal industry and helped millions realize their dreams of starting businesses and securing their families' futures. Welcome to the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. I'm Tom Martin, your host, and I'm really thrilled and honored today to have on the show Brian Liu. So Brian is, as you probably all know, famous for having founded LegalZoom. He's also the former chairman of the board and CEO of LegalZoom. He's a legal tech pioneer, for sure, a serial entrepreneur, and also a thought leader in this area. I just ran into him recently in Tallinn, Estonia. He was keynoting at the Overture Law conference, and that was a happy accident to run into him there. He's also, by the way, the founder of Elm Tree Law and Overture Law, which we'll talk a little bit about. But Brian, it's great to see you.
It's great seeing you again, Tom.
Yeah. So where are you today?
I'm at home in Los Angeles, and it's it's a nice day. Happy.
Well, you're pretty fortunate in Los Angeles, where I grew up as well, that, most of the days are great.
Yeah. Enjoy it here.
Here in Vancouver, very luckily, it's not raining today, but it's a little chilly. So what are you doing now?
I'm involved in so many things, but what I'm pretty excited about right now, what I'm really excited about is Elm Tree. Because I recently had an experience where I had to do some estate planning, helping my parents get some estate planning done. And it was really a struggle. It was really difficult. And I felt like I couldn't get the attention of some of these estate planning attorneys. And I even felt intimidated going through this process. And it took so long to get everything done. And it was just not really user-friendly. And I thought there had to be a better way. So we're coming up, I hope, with something much better, more efficient, more approachable and friendly with Elm Tree, and using real lawyers to guide people and to handhold them through the process and to really make that much easier.
Okay, so Elm Tree is an estate planning product or tool?
Yes, it's about lawyer-prepared living trusts.
More people need a plan, and to have a better service to guide them through that would be invaluable.
Yeah. Look, there are a lot of, good estate planning lawyers out there. There really are. And there's a lot of, self-help services, do-it-yourself services, including the company I started. But I think we're filling a different market. We're filling a different niche here, because there are a lot of people who want or who need a living trust, and they want to avoid the costs and the pain, the headache of probate. And also, people feel like they need the reassurance that it's done right. And that's kind of what we're offering at Elm Tree.
Absolutely. I think, even with AI and computers and all that, people value peace of mind. And only a human lawyer can give that.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something you don't want to mess up.
I remember your keynote at Overture Law. And the thing that I remember about it was that although you touched on AI and technology and what it could do for us, your advice and your thoughts were about how it can affect us very practically, like how it could enable us to be more human.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a really refreshing way of looking at it, because I think far too often people focus on, efficiency, but they don't really look at how that impacts and broadens our ability to be human.
Absolutely. I was at this AI legal conference yesterday, and people are asking the question, what is the landscape going to look like 20 years from now? And a lot of people are going to say, well, a lot less lawyers, maybe no lawyers, maybe no associates, certainly, not so many younger lawyers. I was kind of like the rare dissent there. And I was thinking, I think there might be more lawyers, but the role of these lawyers are going to be very, very different. And one of the most important things is that the AI will free people up to really focus on relationships even more, the human relationships. Because so long as the general counsels and everybody else, so long as the people who have the controls of the purse strings are going to be people, they're still going to want to deal with another person first and foremost, especially at big companies and big Fortune 500 companies, because you know, when your job is on the line and your job is to keep the company safe, who are you going to trust? Yes, you can use AI to make things more efficient and to save money, but in the end, your job depends on getting that thing done right. It doesn't depend on you saving some money. You have to work within your budget. But if the AI hallucinates and you get something done wrong, you're out of a job.
Right. I was curious about your other startup. What is that about?
So Overture is a lawyer-to-lawyer referral network. And what we realized is that sole practitioners are at a huge disadvantage these days because they don't have the network and they can't, the law is not like the way it was done before. Companies they're operating beyond one state, one city. Even let's say, you're a real estate lawyer and now all of a sudden your client might have something done in a different state and you can't help them because you're not authorized to practice in those states and you don't have the network. And that's what we're doing with Overture. We're providing you with a vetted network of other like-minded attorneys who can essentially be your resource and be that help so you can service your client and keep that customer relationship instead of just saying either one, I'm sorry, I can't help you, which is a terrible thing to say, or two, just flat out and say, well, here's somebody else, but not be involved anymore. It keeps the lawyer involved so that they still have the control in the relationship. And then they're able to, most importantly, earn a referral fee and are able to earn some sort of fee split for the client who's still doing work, even though they personally are not handling anymore. So, within a firm, if you're in a firm, you're going to earn some sort of credit when another partner or another lawyer within the firm helps the client that you originated. You get some sort of origination fee, but that doesn't work for sole practitioners. And we've wondered why. And so we're trying to recreate those economics. And not just the economics, but the strength and power that gives you when you have that network.
Yeah, definitely. The network effect would be fantastic for solo practitioners because they feel, I used to be one, and you feel cut off from the rest of your community.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You feel cut off, you feel alone, and it's tough. And it's especially these days when it is competitive and when I feel like, sole practitioners are the ones who are really feeling the fear of AI potentially cutting into their work. I mean, they need all the help that they can get to strengthen that. So again, strengthening the client relationship, strengthening that client bond by saying, I'm the person who can help, regardless of what you need, regardless of what type of, legal help you need. Maybe it's outside my practice area, but I know somebody who can help you. And that's very valuable.
I think if I was a complete outsider, if the only thing I know is that you were the founder of LegalZoom, document automation, like all that stuff, it's interesting and kind of counterintuitive that you're focusing now with Overture and Elm Tree on a very human side of the delivery of legal services, right? And
Yeah.
so, can you respond to that? Like, why that versus, the whole AI first law firm, AI this, AI that?
One, I mean, AI and the people who are good at that, I mean, they're amazing technologists. These people they're geniuses. They're rocket scientists. That's not me. I feel like that's for, really smart younger people who get that technology. But so much of what I do is based on issues and problems I've encountered myself. And I talk to people, my friends my age, and they kind of have the same feeling like me. And again, when I went through this process of trying to find, a estate planning lawyer for my parents, I know other people are feeling the same thing. I think right now at my age, I'm more aware of the importance of these human relationships than ever before. And yes, absolutely, you need technology behind to back things up, to power things, to make things efficient, and to actually do some of the work. And everything that we're doing, whether it's Overture or Elm Tree, will have the technology behind it, but it's not at the forefront. It's not what we sell. I feel like technology powering, Elm Tree is more important than the technology being at the forefront of it. It's people plus technology. That's the key of what's going to get the work done.
And see, everybody, that's what I was talking about from from Brian's keynote at Future Law. Like, it's, don't feel put off by this whole like fear of being replaced, because it's still ultimately in our hands, and we're the ones that really add value to it. You mentioned your age, and we're pretty much peers in that regard. I'd like to go back though to learn more about you and your origin story, as I'm sure my audience wants to know more about that too. You're in LA. Did you grow up in LA?
I grew up in Seattle, down to UCLA for law school, and I've stayed ever since. It's crazy. I can't believe it. But I still don't. I mean, I'm sorry, but I'm still not in love with the Lakers. It's just not the team. It's the team I always grew up rooting against.
What part of Seattle did you grow up in?
I grew up in Bellevue. Went to public schools all my life, and we didn't really have private schools back then.
And what was your neighborhood like? Was it more of a bedroom commutes type of neighborhood, or was it like, what was it like?
It was a nice neighborhood. My parents did everything they could to, make sure we lived in a nice place. And we had a nice view. Bellevue's a suburb of Seattle. And at the time I grew up, it was a pretty sleepy suburb. And I still remember when I was in high school, one of the teachers said, "Hey, anybody who wants a little bit of a summer job, raise their hands. We need people to help with this little factory, this other company that I'm kind of involved with." And I took one of my first summer jobs. I was packaging things for Microsoft, a little company called Microsoft at the time. It was their very first product, and they were shipping. I mean, it was before CD-ROMs. I mean, this was like floppy disks. And we were assembling what they called multiplan. It was the early version of Excel. And we had to package these things, fold these cardboard boxes, put the floppy disk in there, put it into a bigger box, and then shrink wrap it. And yeah, I couldn't do that all summer long, but a couple weeks, that's what I did. And so Seattle has become, and Bellevue especially, has become a tech hub, which it never was when I grew up.
So this was in high school? You were shipping Microsoft product?
Yeah, very, very, very early version of Microsoft. And I mean, my uncle was one of the first, I don't know how many, he was one of the earlier employees at Microsoft. And what he did was he helped them design the mouse, the first ergonomic mouse, when Microsoft was going into hard goods. And so he was there, one of my classmates from school that I grew up with. He ran gaming at Microsoft, and the gaming department consisted of one thing. That was Flight Simulator. And we joked about it. It's like, you're the king of Flight Simulator. Congratulations. But he went on, and I think he ended up being like quite a senior role for at Microsoft.
Do you come from a big family? Do you have a lot of brothers and sisters?
I've got one sister, and she's also a lawyer. Recently retired. She was working in Miami. But even though she's my younger sister, she finished law school a year before me.
And what about your parents? What did they do?
So my parents were in import-export. Actually, my dad was in shipping. So he was working for some container lines at the time. And then he started his own agency to essentially help people ship, goods from either Asia or the US back and forth. And my mom was in computer drafting. So a long time ago, when they had to do this, almost by hand, you literally were using tape and pens, and you draw circuit boards essentially into these giant, pieces of paper, and you would literally draw these circuit boards and say, this is how the diagram of where the wires are going, and that's how you did the design. I mean, she wasn't designing them; she was simply drafting that after the engineers designed it.
Wow. So, I mean, your dad with the shipping business, he was an entrepreneur. He was doing this.
Yes, he started working for these other container lines, and at some point, and I still remember pretty distinctly, he said, "I think we're going to take a little bit of a risk here, and he's going to start this agency on his own." And I still remember the first time he chartered a boat. He was able to get the goods onto it. He made decent amount of money from that first charter. We all went to Washington, D.C. for vacation. He took us there and he was really proud of it. And when he opened his first office in downtown Seattle on Pioneer Square, he had 4 desks in the office. And he had his desk and 3 empty desks. And we're like, Dad, why are these other desks here? What are they here for? I said, don't worry, I'm going to fill them. You rented a larger office, and these desks, did you rent them? No, I bought them. For sure, I'm going to fill them. And it took him a while because I remember, again, some summers I was there in the office just because he was somewhere else. And I was taking one of those 3 desks, and it took a while, but yeah, he did fill them. He eventually filled them and then filled them more. He got a larger office and he had more people. And so he's always actually been an inspiration to me.
That's an awesome example of not only like the entrepreneurship, but the vision and confidence to back that up. And certainly as well with your mom already working like within the computer drafting world, and then the side job that you had at shipping Microsoft stuff. I can see how all of this is, bubbling up.
We didn't think about it at the time. And I mean, even now, I have to say, when the technology that I'm involved with, it's not heavy, hard technology. It's technology like. It's definitely tech, but it's not, I'd say, cutting edge.
Mm. Well, one thing I want to ask you about is that, when you went to college, I was kind of surprised when I was prepping that you majored in biochemistry, right?
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Crazy, right? Yeah, I don't know. I started thinking that I wanted to major in psychology or sociology, and then after a while I was kind of bored, and then I was thinking I want to go to medical school, took some of those courses, and next thing I knew, I hadn't declared a major. At that time I really was interested in political science, but I would have to stay in school for at least another semester, maybe another year to take all the courses. And I didn't have time for that. I didn't want to spend another year in college. So I looked at what courses I had taken and what I could do and graduate in 4 years. And it was chemistry, biochemistry, because I had taken those pre-med courses already. So I just stuck with it. And yeah, I mean, that was very early days. I mean, what we learned was so out of date. It's already so out of date. I mean, nothing is applicable to anything that happens now today.
But still, hard science, very rigorous, I would
Oh
imagine.
yeah,
Yeah.
it was rigorous, definitely. I took some of these classes. I don't know why. I still remember taking there was a course, organic chemistry, that was
Oh,
essentially a weed out course for anybody who wanted to go to medical school. But there were 2 levels of it. There was the organic chemistry for biology majors, and then there is the one for chemistry majors. I took the one for chemistry majors, and I remember the first midterm. First midterm out of 100 points, the professor got up there afterwards and said, yeah, I'm so disappointed in you guys. Like, what? It's like the average score on all the tests out of 150 was 38.
oh my.
And I'm like, what the hell? And he just was so, I mean, like, wow, that was tough. And I mean, I still remember, like, I put all my energy into figuring out how am I not going to do so badly. And he's like, I don't even know if I can grade you guys on a curve. You guys are so bad.
Wow. I didn't even venture to try organic chemistry, Brian, so good on you.
Yeah, it was tough. I had dreams about these chemicals and these reactions because you had to buy a little kit where you had all these different elements and you put them together. And literally I would dream of like these chemical reactions and stuff like that and how it would work in 3D. It was weird. I mean, I was so into it at the time just because I needed to pass that course.
Wow.
I absolutely needed to pass that course. Otherwise, I mean, I chose a different career anyway. So one thing people don't know is I actually ended up taking the MCAT. I actually got into some good medical schools. I actually got into UC San Francisco. But by that time, I realized I didn't want to pursue a career in medicine anymore. So I got in. I asked if I could defer. I don't remember if they said yes or no, but all I know is I never ended up going.
So you got your biochem degree from Berkeley, and then
Yeah.
how did that transition happen then? That's going to be an obvious question in everyone's mind is like from that to the law, like moved you in that direction?
So it turns out that a lot of my good friends in college, they're political science majors and they wanted to go into law school. And so I naturally gravitated towards these people and I wanted to do the same thing. But again, I didn't have time to change majors. So I just continued doing that. And I felt like, my parents, everybody else, well, at least take the MCAT, at least see if you can go to medical school. They're like, oh, don't be a lawyer. Why would you want to do that? You're not going to make any money. That's not right. Medicine's so much better. So I did it. I went through, I went, went through the steps just to do that. And I realized that I just didn't want to pursue that for my career. So I spent another couple of years, and this is why my sister ended up being, law school graduate before me. So I worked for 1 year in Sacramento. I did an externship in the state legislature in Sacramento. I spent 2 years in Taiwan, teaching English, and then I was working at an entertainment company, and that was really fun. And then I'm like, you know what I want to do? I want to go into entertainment law. Yeah. That's why I'm going to go to UCLA and it's in LA and I'm going to be an entertainment lawyer. And that was my ambition at the time.
Well, at UCLA Law, we were just a year apart. You were a year ahead of me. It was a fantastic environment to be in. Especially at the time, there was a lot of things happening. There was the OJ trial. There was
Oh, yeah.
Was it Prop 187? I mean, there was change in the air going on. What was your experience like there?
There's so many things I remember, which is number one, that was the early days of the internet. And we had in the student, I don't know, not the student union, but there was one room and we had these computers that was set up for the internet. And you can do emails, you can go on the World Wide Web at the time. And we're like, wow, what is it? And I remember thinking, very interesting, but I think LexisNexis is kind of similar. That was my first thought. But I did think email was really cool. But, in terms of getting access to news, being able to read the New York Times, even though I didn't have it, I thought you can get that from LexisNexis. So I wasn't super impressed at that time. And I do remember, yes, absolutely. I remember interning at a law firm and everybody was making bets in terms of like, okay, what do you think of OJ? So you gotta, and everybody was like, there's no way he's gonna be, there's no way he's gonna get off. It's gonna be guilty. And that was really fascinating. And that's really interesting because, so much more of what I learned now after working with Robert Shapiro and after hearing about, things I didn't catch at the trial, things that were done and all the facts that came out. And even now, when I think about it, and now that I'm much more informed about, the actual facts, I think it was the right decision. Legally, I think it was the right decision.
Also, for people that might not know, like one of our professors there, criminal law professor, he was like a TV advisor. And so like he would be walking down the halls with like he'd just come off a recording with like makeup on and stuff like that. And and there was a lot of like entertainment people that would come visit us. Yeah, it was definitely an interesting time. And then talk to us a little bit about how things came together with Robert Shapiro, because at the time he was gigantic in terms of his profile. And how did that connection come about?
About 3 years after finishing law school, I was working at a pretty well-known firm, but I kind of knew that I was not going to be a partner. That wasn't my career goal. That was not something I wanted to do. I kind of knew at that time I was going to start something on my own. And so I worked with Brian Liu, who was my best friend in law school. And I think we hit it off because we both saw that we weren't destined to be, partners at law firms. We loved law school and the opportunities that it gave us and the background that it gave us, but it was just, that type of strict career wasn't for us. And so when we came up with the idea of LegalZoom, I knew that we needed to have somebody with some sort of prestige, some name recognition. There needed to be reason to trust this company because they weren't going to trust us. People didn't trust even the internet at that time. And so imagine that you're going to either make a will or you're going to start a company online and you weren't going to trust these, two guys out of UCLA. UCLA is a great school, by the way. right? But 3 years out, you're not going to trust us, thinking that we're going to do this right. And so we knew we had to attach somebody who could get people over that trust factor, and looked around. We made a list of some famous lawyers, and Robert Shapiro was at the top. And lo and behold, he's also in Los Angeles. So one night, Brian Liu called his office. You dial 911 at that time, say, or look at the phone book. There was no internet to find the address. Like, I called the number, and he was hoping to leave a message. And to his surprise, at 8 p.m., Robert Shapiro actually answered the phone. So Brian Lee tells his story great. And he said he was shocked. He didn't know what to do. He started it's like, okay, I know you're calling me about something. You got 30 seconds to say what you're going to say. Otherwise, I'm going to hang up the phone.
Right.
And so 30 seconds, Brian Lee just said everything he could. He did everything he could. We're two guys from New Zealand. We got this great idea. Really want you to think about it. We want you to do whatever he said. He got us at least a meeting, an in-person meeting. And I remember being just so nervous. We were so nervous for weeks thinking about it, preparing for it. What are we going to say about this? And somehow me, Brian Lee, and Eddie Hartman, who was our other co-founder, we went into his office and pitched him as best as we could, and pitched him again, wanted another meeting. And at some point he said, very interested. I'll join you as part of the team.
That's amazing.
That's how it started.
And just a foundational moment, really, because the way that, LegalZoom has affected and impacted and I think leveled up the legal community has been, something that's been with us for the past, I think, 25 years now. It's been fantastic and has influenced us in many, many different ways for the better, I think. I think in a way, it was a great incentive for lawyers to become more technologically savvy than they would have been otherwise. There's a lot in terms of your time with LegalZoom and growing it. And we can't get into all of that, but are there maybe a couple of things that stand out to you in terms of stories that you remember of how it helped people or relationships that you created during your time at LegalZoom?
I mean, we have so many great people. We had so many great employees because there was no legal tech community. There was no tech community in Los Angeles at that time. And I feel like some of the LegalZoom alumni have gone on to become leaders of other really, amazing companies. So that's one thing I'm really proud about. It's interesting something you said earlier, though, Tom, which was that, the influence it had on the legal community, because I never really thought about that. And that certainly wasn't our goal. I was so in the moment at the time, just trying to do what we were doing, trying to build a business. It wasn't about, making an influence in the legal community. It was really about how can we, number one, build a business so that I don't have to go begging for my job back. And two, how can we help more people? Because we knew at that time you had lawyers who were very expensive and out of reach, and kind of intimidating. And then you had these self-help services, which were, they were Nolo books. I mean, you went to the bookstore at that time, you bought a Nolo book, and I still remember it was a tear-out form at the end that you would either have to type, which is crazy. Nobody knew how to use a typewriter. You fill out these tear-out forms for your will. I thought there has to be something better than that. That was like really the epiphany, which was everything is happening online now. You even have everything from online stock trading, online tax preparation. Why isn't there something for online law? And that's kind of like how we came up with the idea. That's how I came up with the idea, actually.
Well, fantastic idea. And yeah, it definitely did have ripple effects on other lawyers. And, especially right now, like things have become so crazy. And by the way, you and I had actually we created one of those first legal tech and law firm somewhat partnerships in terms of LegalZoom at the time was marketing prenuptial agreements. To support that nationally, my firm worked with you to service that demand. And I think it was one of the first that did that,
Yeah,
but really highlighted the way that these things can work together. They're not necessarily in opposition.
absolutely. Because in the end, LegalZoom was and still is about enhancing access. And lawyers always talk about, this concept of access to justice. We've redefined it as democratizing law, making law more accessible to everybody. Because I tell this story, which is, if you think about the law and what lawyers do, the law is filled with potholes, right? And I'll just take an example of probate, for example. Like, why does probate exist? Why does it exist? Yes, there are some cases some situations where people are going to be fighting over something and you want to judge, but the vast majority of, estates don't need to go through probate. So lawyers came up with this idea of a living trust, which avoids probate, right? So now you have to pay a lawyer to do this and get these documents done right to avoid this terrible thing that we call probate. Now, if the government or anybody else really wanted to increase access and make it easier for people, they would just abolish probate. They would just abolish it. But no, they feel like in order to get these benefits, you have to use a lawyer to obtain these benefits. And I talk about a corporation. What's a corporation for? It's to protect your personal assets against liability, so you're not responsible for the company debts. And that's how an LLC or a corporate form is different from you just doing business as a sole proprietorship. Well, great. And what is a corporation? What's an LLC anyway, right? It's it's a document you file with a state. Well, but what is it? Is it a physical thing? No, it's just a metaphysical thing. So what they could have done is they could have just said, you know what, it doesn't matter. Even if you're a sole proprietorship, we're not going to hold you personally liable. But no, they didn't do that. They force you to do these things where you've got to file these documents with a state, hire a lawyer, yada, yada, yada. So what we're doing by increasing access is we're saying everybody should enjoy these protections. We should have these benefits. We shouldn't just limit it to those people who have the means of hiring lawyers to get the benefits that everybody should have had. I mean, if I was truly like a little bit of an anarchist, I'd be like, I want to change the law. But that's not where, for a lot of reasons, people don't want to change those laws. So I want to increase access to that so that more people can get those benefits without going through either the expense or the pain.
I think that kind of thinking is really powerful. The coming back to first principles, right? Like, why are we doing this? So it opens the door for me to ask you about something that I think people wouldn't forgive me if I didn't ask about it, because it fits really cleanly into that kind of thinking back to first principles. I mean, you may have seen the recent decision where UPL was touched on, and how, whether or not it's free speech or not, or whether or not you could have these like neighborhood advocates in Upsolve that were able to assist people directly. And I know that LegalZoom definitely had its history of,
Oh, yeah.
when it was expanding, having to deal with these issues as they came up. Is UPL another one of those things that is kind of like a metaphysical fiction that's been created that is really preventing us from doing better and helping more people?
It's definitely part of it. I mean, it's definitely part of it. I mean, and if you look at it, I'll answer it by making a comparison, right? Which is in most other countries, law school is not a graduate program. Law school is a major that you have in college. There's no 3-year graduate program. You're major in law, become a lawyer. So that's number one. Number two is that I think this is still true in half the states in the US. UPL, unauthorized practice of law, is defined as you engaging in the practice of law, right? So how is the practice of law defined in probably half the states? You're going to love this. Definition of the practice of law are those things that lawyers have traditionally done. That is defined as the practice of law. So if you do something that lawyers have traditionally done, you're engaging in the unauthorized practice of law. And it would take only a lawyer to make a circular argument like that actually seem rational.
Yeah.
Because The practice of law is a very, very squishy thing to define. Even if you try to define it, it's hard.
I know it when I see it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting in the medical profession, you have these different levels of professionals. You have nurses, registered nurses, physicians assistants, and they're allowed to do this, they're allowed to do that. Yeah, I don't know if you noticed, but let's say you go and get a vaccine or you get some injections, or you're getting blood drawn. It's not the doctors doing that. It's a nurse, it's somebody else, right? And they've got defined roles. A doctor has to prescribe the medication. Not in all cases, because sometimes different people can do that. But they have a defined role with all these other people. I'm not saying we have the most successful medical system in the world, but they're trying to make it more efficient and increase access. And we don't really have that in law. We don't have things, and some states are trying to create these different categories. And California, one of the things they did, which is what actually, one of the things we relied on when we started LegalZoom, is they had on the books a statute for what they called legal document assistance.
Right.
And so it set forth what you could do. As far as I know, no other state had that. And I don't think no other state has that today.
Yeah, I completely agree with you that one critical way to expand access to justice would just be to let more people be suppliers of that justice. And there's safe ways to do that. Well, with the little time that we have left, I do want to touch back on Overture and Elm Tree. What is your plan for the future for those?
Well, I'm hoping I've got really high hopes for Elm Tree. I really think that we might be onto something there. And hopefully you circle back with me in another year and you'll be like, yeah, you're right. I just sense that there's a need for a service like this right now. I feel like there's a lot of demand, and we're going through this, probably the largest wealth transfer in the history of, it's definitely the history of the world, definitely the history of the US. You've got a lot of baby boomers who are older and they need help. And there's not a lot of estate planning lawyers out there, and they're all very busy. And people need different levels of help. And it's something that needs to be made a little bit more approachable. It's something that people need to understand what's going on. They don't want to feel intimidated by it. And estate planning it's a very interesting thing because it's very, very fragmented. The market's very fragmented. And I think there is a great opportunity here.
Well, definitely. There's a huge market for it. And I continue to be impressed by you, Brian, like in your focus on the technology, but more importantly, the human aspect of it that brings us all together.
Well, thanks, Tom.
There's a couple of questions I want to ask you before we go. And one of them, the first one, no one can listen to this and not be impressed by the diversity of different things that you've been involved in and are currently, like at least, 2 startups going on right now.
Yeah.
And so for their benefit, do you have any advice about how to keep things balanced, how to juggle these things, and also keep like a work-life balance?
I mean, I've always believed in work-life balance. I love the ocean. I try to go surf every weekend. And I need that time. What I realized, somebody told me this a long time ago, is like when you rest, I've caught myself staying at the office until sometimes 9, 10 o'clock, trying to think through something. And I'm like, I have to solve this. I have to get this done before I go home. And I'm not able to get it done. And it just doesn't work. And the longer I stay there, the less efficient you get. And so I go home, and sometimes on my drive home, I figured it out. So you need these times to try to work through things, work through problems and issues that you have in your head. So that's one thing. But the second thing is, the best thing is you don't have to always be working. If you really enjoy it or you think about it, it just comes naturally anyway. I mean, there's some times where you really do need to grind and do work, but sometimes it just flows naturally. But I'd say, yeah, definitely take your rest, take your breaks, and enjoy yourself, because you'll actually be so much more efficient when you put yourself and you devote that time to getting the work done.
Well, I think that's wonderful advice, and also leads into the next question, which has to do with after doing all the work, after this career of building LegalZoom, about the new startups that you have, what makes it worthwhile for you at the end of the day? What is that source of satisfaction that you get from it?
You don't think about it at the time. I mean, I look back and from what you said, I never thought about the impact LegalZoom had on the overall legal profession and other lawyers. I just thought, it was pretty good. It was, we did well. I don't think it came up with that. Again, it's not a satisfaction from, doing something that's changing the world. It was just, for me, I think of the little wins, the small things, the people that we helped. And I still remember those particular stories. It's the individual stories that drive me. Again, I still remember, when we were doing a demo for LegalZoom, and there was one person who was a friend of, Mr. Shapiro's, and we were going over there and essentially drafting a will and drafting, some of these other estate planning documents for her. And we're doing this as a demo when we were trying to raise money. And man, it was heartwarming and heartbreaking at the same time, because she was, she had terminal illness, and I just, listening to her, made us realize that every document that we're doing really affects people's lives. It really affects them in a much deeper way than just words on paper. Every business that we start, every LLC that we formed, it's somebody's dream. It's their lifelong dream to start a business. And it's not just, I hope to make money. It's, I hope to I hope to live the American dream. I hope that this is something that can support my family. I hope this is some extra money. And whatever it is, it's a dream. It's not like a head in the cloud type of dream. It's something that they passionately believe in. And being able to help those people and understanding that, I think that was one of the key things about LegalZoom and our brand that we understood. That it's not just a legal document. It's not just, again, words on paper. They're very human emotions that we're affecting and that we can help, and we can help people realize this better thing. And that's what drives me.
Wow, Brian, that's profound and a huge impact that you've had and continue to have on the industry. I would put, what you thought up with LegalZoom and created and grew up there with the crevasse system. Like it's just one of those foundationally influential systems that's rippled through the industry. So congratulations.
Thank you, Tom.
Well, for everyone that's listening and they want to keep in touch with you and learn more about what you're doing, how can they do that?
You can reach out to me via LinkedIn. That's one thing. That's probably the easiest way. Or take a look at Elm Tree Law.
Well, that sounds great. And Brian, thank you so much again for being on my show and getting to spend some time together. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tom. It was fun.
And for all of you watching, thank you so much for hanging out with me and Brian. See you next time. Thank you so much for watching the latest episode of the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. To keep in the loop about upcoming episodes, please subscribe to LawDroid Manifesto and you'll get notified. Thanks for watching. See you next time.